Next panel, guys. We are going to be talking about tech history and the crypto ecosystem. And we are going to talk about the characteristics and some of these misconceptions people have. And with Subhashji over here, we talked about some of the misconceptions from the government side and how central banks, treasuries are also trying to portray some of this to protect things like that. So now we are going to debate it amongst us. We've got flown in from UK, my young friend, Ismail Malik. Come on down. CEO and founder of Blockchain Labs. Know him for, God knows, 7 years in this blockchain space. Been on various stages together around the world. Ronit Ghosh, Global Sector Head, Co-Head of FinTech Group Citibank. Ronit, is Ronit around? He's around? And Robert, let's have you down again. Robert, CEO of Luca. Put your hands together for all of these gentlemen, please. Thank you. Okay, let's start off. There is a lot of misconception, and let's start with what Subhashji said. A lot of misconceptions, crypto equals bad. A lot of misconceptions, blockchain equals Bitcoin. A lot of misconceptions, blockchain, crypto plus energy, electricity equals very expensive. Blockchain eco is not green. Who would like to take that and debate that one first? Ishmael, you're the controversial one. I'd love you to give a go on that one.
So the green debate is it's quite a loaded debate, right? So, I mean, actually, I was in an art college and I said, look, do you want to put your art online? And they said, oh, we can't do that. You know, you're going to ruin the world, right? And I was like, hold on, where did this come from? And they're like, oh, we read about NFTs are, you know, some sort of carbon intensive industry. And I was like, well, actually, I'm minting the NFTs off the solar panel on the roof on the college. So, you know, and most of crypto is done from DAM energy, if I'm correct, right? It's been moving around, but most of it was being mined in China, and it was, you know, okay, there is some ecological damage, but I'm not sure on the carbon footprint. So that's quite a loaded question. And then secondly, like, let's try to do a footprint of the Visa network, right, on how much carbon. So I think, personally, I think it's a non-starter, right? I don't think the question's as ironed out as it has been. My opinion is this was kind of the final gasp from this sort of anti-crypto brigade. It was like, ooh, what do we cling on to now? Let's bring up this sort of environmental debate. But if you look behind the figures, there is absolutely no real hard evidence that says crypto or NFTs or any of this tech stack has a significantly larger carbon print than any of the similar technology stacks. So it's a red herring. You know, they tried everything else. You know, crypto is for money launderers, and then and now it's like, okay, how do we slow down the adoption? It's bad. Let's keep short. There may be a little bit more politics in it. There is a large movement called Extinction Rebellion that a lot of the governments in the Western world are quite fearful of. It's got a lot of sort of youth audience growing. They kind of stop planes and trains and and I think they're trying to sort of keep them out of the crypto fold, especially around the financing of the sort of green movement, which would be a tsunami. So I think there is a bit of behind-the-scene politics that we could dig in if we've got time.
Well done. Thank you. Let's go to Ronit, okay? Traditional banking has come a long way, okay? Bankers, and you being in City, do they see that there is now limited, what I call footprint on the high street for traditional retail type of banking for sure, where, you know, the days of the ATMs, the days of going there with your passbook, or the days of the checkbook, the days of, doing transactional with retail bank accounts and sending money, receiving money are over, with so many neobanks coming on board, okay? So with neobanks coming on board, and I've always said it for the last 5 years for sure, that 50% of the high street banks are going to disappear, or they'll be impacted, and that is going to be disrupted to a great amount. So where do you see in the banking world now how it's going to go forward?
Sure, thanks for that question. None of us in this room woke up this morning and said, I want to do banking. Right? Like, no one says, I want to go to the ATM, or the modern equivalent, which is flip open my laptop and do a transaction, right? No one. I've been in finance too long now, but over 25 years. I never wake up in the morning saying, I want to do finance. I wake up in the morning and say, I want to buy a house because my family likes living in Dubai, so I'm going to buy the house I live in, which is what I did earlier this year. After 5 years of living in Dubai, my landlord called me and they said, market's picked up, I'm thinking of selling. And I was like, my family really like living in this house. And I called a bank. And the only reason I actually called 3 banks. The only reason I called 3 banks was that I needed a mortgage because I don't have that much cash lying around to buy the house, you know. I've clearly not been in crypto long enough.
Yes.
So that's the thing, you got to remember that it's a means to an end. So where does this go, looking ahead, where does it go? You know, I took a Kareem here to this conference. Okay, the map navigation, GPS, etc., makes mobility possible, but there's a huge payment angle to it, which is I've not used cash or a card to pay because it's embedded. And embedded finance is the future of a lot of consumer finance. So we go online, we shop, whether it's Amazon or whatever e-commerce platform we're using, the payment becomes seamless. I walk out of the shop, it recognizes my face as I walk out. Boom, payment is done. Hopefully with a few security checks. But so that's where the future of payments is, which is the future of finance is. And the name at the front might be the same bank name, whether it's a famous bank name from the UAE or from America, wherever. The name might be the same, but behind the scenes, what's behind the name changes. And it changes every 20, 30 years. I mean, we live in the present, and there's a kind of intellectual or mental concept, which is we overvalue the present. So we always think, because we live in the present, oh wow, what we're living through is amazing. Can you imagine living through electricity, going from dark to light? Can you imagine living through the steam engine, where instead of living and dying next to your village, you could then travel hundreds of kilometers? So there's always been change, and we're just living through another period of change, and it's digital change. And it's a change that if you're born in the pre-digital age, like both of us are, we're going to struggle compared to my 7-year-old, right? So we have to adapt. We either adapt or we don't, and the banks that adapt will survive, and the banks that don't will die. Nothing new here. This is not a new thing. If you go back 50 years ago and look at the list of the biggest banks in the world, you won't recognize most of them. Even 30 years ago, like if I did a poll, what are the 10 biggest banks in the world 40 years ago? Pretty sure most people in this room would not know the name, because they'd be mainly Japanese, but that's another story.
Well,
just on the energy point, can I pick up on what you said? I think it's true that it's overdone. Like, you know, people are looking for a reason to knock crypto, will say, whoa, it's got a big energy footprint. But we shouldn't underestimate the potential challenge this poses. And I'm coming at it not as an anti-crypto person, because there's one element of kind of anti-crypto, which is, it's whatever. We just don't like it. It's new, right? And a lot of banks will be in that, and a lot of governments and central banks. But what the difficulty ESG places for crypto is that it's another immovable. So if you're like, if blockchain and crypto is one immovable force, you're hitting another immovable force. And in many parts of the world, particularly in Europe, and also among the younger generation, this is a massive issue, which 2 years ago I didn't fully comprehend. Today it's a massive issue. a lot of people will not, particularly on proof of work blockchain, will not engage. And so this may be a big opportunity for proof of stake, but I'll just leave it at that.
It's already happening.
I mean, I think
I want to
the-
bring
the same-
Robert into
The same
this.
argument, though, applies to anything that uses
Anything
electricity.
that uses, absolutely.
I mean, are we going to stop using computers, or are we going to turn all the lights
No, but the
off?
question is the use case, right? Like, the more energy is used by air conditioning in the US, where I guess you're from, right? But we need air conditioning. We're going to not be able to live in Texas or in Dubai, right? So now you've got to make the case of, if this uses as much energy as air conditioning, what do I get out of it? So,
I mean,
which
you're
you're
right.
gonna tell me
How do
this-
we create energy in a way that supports ESG objectives?
Absolutely agree,
That
yeah.
makes sense. Crypto is just one of every. I mean, who working remotely or living remotely in the last year wasn't using electricity or a computer?
Yeah. But the question is,
all the
like,
same arguments
what's the
apply to
value we're
other things
getting
beyond
from it?
crypto.
So in a way, it's done crypto a favor. It's pushed crypto towards ESG. So they've shot themselves in the foot. We've suddenly now got a renewable grid growing around crypto. So it's brought crypto 5 years forward, right?
Much forward, a lot
so,
forward now.
you know, I've just launched a project, NFT Solar, and we just got a niche for doing NFTs minting via solar. So I would not have done that had it not been for this ESG backlash, right? Yeah.
I mean, the surplus of energy in Canada. Look at all the mining operations that are setting up in Canada because of that. You know, there's a number of other. Compounds that with comparing any proof of work versus proof of stake, and there's thousands of different protocols that are there. So you can't stereotype crypto and say that it's against ESG or that it abuses any energy objectives.
And there's lots of cryptos now that use a fraction. I mean, everyone thinks crypto equals Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not used for fractions. There are so many other medium types of cryptos which takes a fraction of the energy. 75,000, if you see Solana just now, 75,000 transactions per second. Unheard of. This is Visa level transactions. How much energy, how much XYZ does
Sorry,
it
it's
use?
not Visa level transactions.
75,000. Go check out Solana. That's why it's gone 20x in 6 months. So
The Solana's been a great story, but come on, it's not Visa.
I think, you know, we need to accept it. Even when I was there, internet.com days, we were saying, who's going to buy these things on eBay? Well, actually, eBay didn't exist at the time. Who's going to buy online? And we want to look and feel and touch what we buy. And I remember talking to the Toys R Us, Woolworths, and all these people saying, yeah, it'll never happen. We want to go there and take our little Johnny there and sit on a car. Look at them, they disappeared. So it is happening, and it's happening faster, as Ishmael just said. You know, it is not all energy driven, and transaction speeds and all of that is coming up big time. I would like to hear from you, Robert, on some of the use cases, because you're more into practical consultancy work and doing some real life projects, some use cases.
I mean, if you know, smart contracts were a big theme today. Look at all the paper that's saving. I mean, look there, the amount of examples that
And
any
the middleman
type
is
of
cutting.
crypto is solving, and the processes that it's making that are more efficient, that are saving energy compared to one tiny portion of this, which is actually building all the blocks inside the protocols, which is what people are talking about when they're talking about how crypto hurts ESG objectives. All of those other things outweigh them 100 times before the work that it takes to mine all the blocks.
So can I be a little bit controversial?
Yeah, go for it.
So how about crypto creates these controversies to keep itself in the headlines, right? It's like, hey, it's not kind of getting the audience it needs. Let's throw an ESG in there. What's the topic of today, right? So every time crypto hits, like when it hit the financial crisis, it gets the front page, right? As long as crypto's in the front page, guess what it does? It increases adoption, right? So crypto wins. In the end, as long as it's in the front page, whether it's a good news, bad news, negative, positive, you know, sour, you know, there's an article today when I flew back in from London was crypto affects your love life, right? So now there's a campaign against crypto because they're saying the what they call crypto widows, the husbands are completely addicted on betting on crypto, playing on crypto, trading, and they're neglecting their spouses. So there's a campaign now, and so what does it do? Like, oh, are we going to cry? Oh no, crypto's going to be, is anti, spouses, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's in the front page. That is the agenda. That's what's been talked about. So every time what looks like negative, it increases the adoption. Guess what? Because a millennial, 18 years old, 16, 17,
They love that.
loves it. And
They
he's
love
like,
it.
oh,
They love it.
crypto's back in, because he just sees the crypto sign. He goes in, it reminds him to log in, check his account, coin market cap hits, goes up. So, it's
No, absolutely correct.
good or
Bang on.
bad, it's working.
Bang on. And Ishmael, what you said there as well, if we just think 3 years ago when the crash came with Jamie Dimon from good old JPs and all those companies out there in New York saying crypto equals bad and it's a scam, and I remember us meeting Nura Rubini as well in London, crypto bad, the whole market tanked, but guess what was happening behind it? They're buying, we will sack any of our people if they are even trading crypto, and yet they were creating their own exchanges, including the Goldman Sachs of the world. So the millennials see this, and the millennials are the people who have become millionaires, capitalizing on it, not only from the tech side, but also from the trading side. And that's where the new wave is coming, and we need to absolutely acknowledge it. I'd like to hear from you, Robert, on where do you see this misconception now, where people have, including governments, as we heard from Subhash earlier, was the Indian rupee digitalization, the Chinese yuan, which now is really going forward. I have a view that they will soon start telling to the dollar, we are going to trade in this medium, whether you like it or not. Where do you see that going?
I think wherever it's going, nobody has come up with that yet, I think is safe to assume. Bitcoin went into production 12 years ago. We support at Luca almost 400 institutions, and across them, we support them across over 9,000 crypto assets, and that's not including all the NFTs that are all individual. And so, we're constantly seeing innovators build new protocols, reinvent Bitcoin in new ways, introducing smart contracts and doing things, and that innovation is going to continue, and we're going to benefit more from it. I think it's some of the misconceptions that we see is, one, crypto is not an asset class. It's technology. I know you mentioned that a couple times, and it's technology that can be applied to any asset. Just like the NFT example with the mining that's out there. And we will see people continue to apply it towards asset after asset. And what's most interesting to me is that when we do that and we facilitate exchanging these assets for one another in fractional quantities without borders, it's really what it's doing is it's giving accessibility to traders that they didn't have before. And that accessibility is creating liquidity in asset classes that are traditionally not liquid, like real estate. And that's really the very exciting thing. That's why I joined Luca. When I heard about this, I started doing research on it. And I think that's what people kind of miss. I think they focus typically a bit too much on the protocol, on the blockchain, and they don't focus just on what people are doing around the world as an organization, as a global organization, and that's really the thing that's most impactful about all of this.
No, absolutely, bang on. Ronit, I'd like to ask you, from the banking perspective, this thing's been happening for those of us who've been really in there 8-10 years solid, okay? The banks have already started seeing all these neobanks popping up, doing hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of transactions all the time, okay? Actually, how many of you guys have an electronic wallet in the audience? Yeah, you see more than 50%, okay? How many of you guys actually went into your bank in the last 12 months? 5-10%, okay? How many of you think going there, and I know Ronit gave an example of mortgages is one-off, but that is a one-off. You don't do that once a year, okay, for example. How many of you think there's a place for banking rather than banks for doing the day-to-day stuff rather than loans and mortgages and things like that? More roles for banking, right? Well done. Now, where do you think banks with this movement is going to go? Do you think they are agile enough? And the mortgage example, by the way, you gave, there are so many people doing peer-to-peer loans as well, and peer-to-peer even mortgages now based on crypto assets. So that's already happening as well. Do you think the banks are going to be agile enough to adopt some of this stuff, or embrace it to some way, or come up with something else? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer, it's a pretty short answer. No.
Meaning they're not agile enough.
No, they're not agile. It's not a debate.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Sorry, I'm being flippant. But more seriously, I'd take you back to my earlier answer, which is, and you've answered it yourself by saying, we need banking, not banks. I mean, you'll find no one outside maybe even in the C-suite of a bank. I mean, no one thinks you need banks. You need banking. And just as I said, if you go back 50 years or 100 years ago, the names might be the same, but what's behind is fundamentally changed. Now, take a historical perspective. I mean, the title of this panel is about tech history. And think about the banking history. Like, how we've had banking for ever since civilization, recorded civilization started. Recorded civilization, at least today we think, started about roughly 5,000 years ago in the Near East, Mesopotamia, Iraq, modern-day Iraq. The first piece of writing, it wasn't a love poem, it was a contract. It was an IOU, it was a debt contract, which is, you could say, an early form of money. So the oldest piece of writing was money. Where was money stored? Who did banking? You did it in a temple, or the equivalent of a temple. You move forward, governments or centralized power in some societies would basically issue tokens, which began to be called coins, about 600 BC, what's Anatolia today, Lydia. And form factors of what's money constantly have changed. What we consider banks, the word bank, where does it come from? It's an Italian word for bench. Money lenders, bankers would be sitting on benches in Renaissance Florence, Renaissance Venice. That's how banking began in modern Europe. The 90-day bill, which is a very standard banking instrument today, it took 90 days to go from Venice to London on horseback, et cetera, et cetera. The reason I'm giving this history lesson is not because, well, I did study history, but the other reason is banking constantly changes. Most modern banks in, let's say, in Europe, which is like where the oldest banks are, really grew up with industrialization. They funded industrialization. Or if they were retail banks, they were mortgage lenders, they were community banks. They weren't banks. They were actually a backlash to banks. They were the excluded. They were in England, where we grew up, I guess, 19th century England. Ordinary people didn't have access to banks. The big banks didn't want to deal with them because big banks dealt with rich people. So they created what became building societies or credit unions in the US. Banking always changes. Now we're in a digital age. We've been in an information age. So the digital age will create, whether it's crypto, whether it's neobanks, it'll create digitally native companies. Now the banks will try to respond to that by saying, I'm going to have my own digital bank. Like a lot of you said you had digital wallets, but whose digital wallet are you using? I use a big tech company's digital wallet. I stopped using my physical wallet because of the pandemic. It's hot here, right? So I go out my shorts. I put trousers on today to come on stage. I don't carry a wallet. I carry a phone. And that phone company's wallet is what I use. So this could be interesting. I totally agree with the premise that we're in a digital age, an information age, but will it be crypto? I have an open mind. Full disclosure, I own quite a few coins, but will it be crypto, or could it actually be the irony of ironies that we're all sitting here talking about decentralization, but we end up with really centralized companies. These big tech companies are way bigger than any bank. The bank I worked for, the JP Morgan you mentioned, and actually, will we all end up being sort of digital serfs to these big tech companies, or CBDCs and governments.
Yeah, because decentralized banks is already happening. You know, I've done one 3 years ago. Decentralized banking is happening because people want banking rather than banks. Yeah. And they don't want the big pyramid, multi-layer, big glass, 50,000 employee expense way of doing things because it costs. At the end of the day, it's like the cost of the client.
They want convenience. And this is what the crypto guys on this panel, if I can call them that, need to solve for. Because if big tech gives me convenience, I will use big tech as a consumer. Not big bank or crypto.
Absolutely.
Whoever makes our life simple will win.
And that's what's happening with quite a lot of the, when I don't want to call out advertising free for companies and wallets.
It's when we talk about crypto businesses specifically, maybe separate them from crypto, and because they're the ones that have been innovating the most and using crypto, and when they're intersecting with banks, which is happening this year around the world, which is very interesting. It's truly a clash of cultures. And why are they not agile, for example? Why are they so slow?
Is what I'm trying to say.
It's because they're managing risk, really, in my opinion. Right, and they have to do that, right? There's capital requirements, there's licenses, there's all kinds of governance over it that's making sure that they're doing things responsibly, and that when they're offering a loan, that they have an ability to actually service that and do the right thing, and they're not going to default, and that the borrower is not going to default, and so on. When you look at crypto businesses, we started, when I joined Luca, the very first thing I was asked to do was to go out and speak to a lot of these big OTC desks and crypto exchanges. Cool. And I was coming from PwC, so you know the first question that is intuitive for me is, hey, what's your biggest problem? And they would say, well, we don't know how profitable we are. Can you imagine a bank saying that today? We don't know how profitable we are. I mean, it would not.
Yeah. Or what's your 3-year projection?
It wouldn't work.
How much count do you want? How much this? Right. What's your profit? Blah, blah, blah.
So when you look at that side of the spectrum and you see a business that literally doesn't even know how to value its own assets and its own capital, and then you look at banks that are moving incredibly slow, right? I mean, they're still implementing core banking replacements that don't utilize cloud technology. You know, they've got to jump from where they are today all the way to where crypto is, which is too big of a leap. So I think when you say people need banking and not necessarily banks, I think that's spot on. I mean, the role's not going to go away. Someone's going to fill it. The question is it the businesses that we're used to, or is it going to be new logos? I mean, we're already seeing Kraken has a banking and depository license. Avanti has one as well. They're about to launch their business. And there's going to be a bunch of other ones, I'm sure, that we'll see. So I think the role is going to be there. People need the function, all those processes. It's just a question of who's going to be satisfying it. And will it be centralized or not centralized or whatnot? You know, supply and demand will drive all that.
Banks traditionally rely on central banks, you know, moving money around, credits and debits.
Actually,
right?
I called it a cartel.
So CBD, the cartel, right? CBDCs are going to largely do away with the need for sort of retail banks and what have you, right? And that's already.
No, I don't know. I think CBDCs, sorry to contradict you, I think even the CBDCs that are through the government will have a digital form of that cartel, treasury, central banking.
But they're gonna sort of dismantle the existing sort of retail banking infrastructure that we've got, right? They're going to dislodge it, but it goes further than that. The metaverse is going to decimate how we see value altogether. So this idea of banking, as we see it, people want to swap skins for, you know, in-game assets here, and then they can swap that for reward points over there. So this whole idea of how we swap and translate value is completely alien for a generation growing up, right?
Absolutely.
But
it's happening, right?
If I offer my kid money, he says, I don't want money, I want a skin, or I want some V-Bucks, I want something else, right? So the banking may remain for asset management, you know, transfer. So all these legacy sort of industries that are managing money, managing debt. But for a millennial generation growing up, or, you know, the generation, you know, following the millennials, you know, the idea of a bank or even the word bank has no relevance to them, right? No. So, you know, we're entering. So when Zuckerberg moves and says the metaverse, there is a lot behind that, which says, hey guys, we are finally got the tech stack to move away from how we look at value, right? So the disruption is going to be 10x bigger than we're predicting because we're kind of preaching to ourselves. We're kind of finding a place for an ancient institution that
And I see that
doesn't
this side
really
of 5
fit.
years, by the way. I see this side of 5 years.
Completely
Could we
agree,
just,
completely agree with you.
take,
But it's a question of transferring value, storing value, managing value. 100% agree with you. But the key thing I'm trying to say is, don't think of the bank as something that's existed for 5,000 years. It changes, and this is the problem of, we always think there's today and there's been the last 5,000 years. No. I mean, in the 1960s and 1980s, we thought we were reinventing banking. In the 1830s, we were reinventing banking when an ordinary person could get credit in that first industrial urban area. That was revolutionary. We've got to stop thinking that we're the first revolutionaries. But I 100% agree with you that we don't need for it to be a bank.
Yeah. Okay. We are running over. So one question. Who's going to have the quick question? You've had a question before. Sorry. Anyone else? One question. New face. Just give out your name. Microphones. Where's the microphones? Microphone at the back over there. Microphone at the back. Today would be nice. Thank you. Super. Just announce your name, please.
Good morning, Bilal.
Hi.
I've got a question for Mr. Robert. So basically, you guys were talking about banking, and we all know that banking basically have existed for such a long time. It built trust into years and centuries. The government have a lot of support and power into it. How can we assure today to make people trust cryptocurrency and blockchain and other currencies other than banks?
Good question. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Thank you.
the same way with a bank. Whatever bank you choose to bank with as an individual, when you're picking a business to interact to hold your crypto, the same decisions still apply. I mean, if you are going to choose Kraken or Coinbase to act as your bank, even though Coinbase is not a regulated bank, but in many ways they're filling a lot of the same functions that a bank would serve. You just have to make a decision and determine whether or not you want to trust that business, just like you would your existing bank. So I think it's a lot of the same decisions that take place. There's a big misconception that you have to trust the individual blockchain or asset, but that's different than trusting the bank or the business that you're working with.
I mean, I'll add to that. Is it custodial or non-custodial, right? Do you trust yourself to hold your assets, or are you putting it into custodianship? Right? That's going to be the big question that sort of drives the next 5 years. How big does the non-custodial sector sort of grow?
Appreciate your answer. I'm just quickly going to continue just for a second. Like I said, banks have existed for such a long time. People who know nothing about crypto, about blockchain, about coins, about trading, about such things, we have no big support for us, such as governments, to tell them, okay, you can trust us. You can change from bank, keep your money into trading, put your money into coins, do something else. And they say, for the future of our children, we just want to put our money in our bank. It's okay, they will take some interest, but still, they still keep money in the bank, even though bank take interest, okay? But bank have good supports. So how can we just make people trust other things than banks?
Dogecoin.
Yeah, I think the main thing there is, before you choose your neobank or where you're going to store your currency, Ishmael touched on it very quickly, is the custodial versus non-custodial side, number one. Second is it regulated? Okay, meaning do they follow any form of regulations for EMI, wallet regulations, exchange regulations, and where are they regulated as well, and how is it managed in terms of governance of who makes the decisions to pass money around, where it's held. Fourth thing is, do they have any form of insurance? A lot of people now look for whoever has got that money, be it on an exchange type of a wallet, how much is it insured? So, even the Lloyds of London insure some of these crypto exchanges now, especially after the Mount Gox scenario, and the classic, you know, when I was there with Tim Draper and he took this thing out and says, I know who I can trust with my money, and he goes like this. It's only him. So it's the custodial, non-custodial debate comes in.
Well, and look at Venezuela, look at El Salvador,
Yeah.
look at Brazil, right? Those are examples of where what you just described, that trust does not exist, and people are looking for alternatives. And many of your individuals there don't have bank accounts because they don't have that trust. And absolutely, you go to Coinbase, they're insured. If they have a breach and Bitcoin is stolen from Coinbase, insurance is going to play a big role in making sure that the individual that is holding their Bitcoin at Coinbase is covered, it isn't affected by it. Other exchanges around the world, you don't have that same benefit, and so you should absolutely make sure that you're aware of that when you are keeping if you are investing in crypto. Make sure that you look at where you're keeping it and if they're insured, if they're regulated, because many of them are not. And you shouldn't necessarily blindly trust them.
Yeah, and Binance is the classic just now. A lot of people pulling out of it for many reasons, some of it, or most of it political. But at the end of the day, it's like there's only X amount of money that's going to be held in their facility, and the rest is on cold storage somewhere else, backed up somewhere else, whatever. But they give you the choice as well. Do you want to keep your own, or do you want to keep it here, right? And they have their insurance to go with it.
You've got to
We've
accept
got,
that, you know,
1 minute.
Crypto is the land of risk capital, right? 80% of that capital, especially in the
Yes.
retail sector, is people who want to, you know, put a level of risk on some level of funds. So that's why that cute dog looks very attractive, right? It's like, I want to put 500 on this cute dog. You know, it may, you know, balloon, it may not, but, you know, risk capital, because how many flat screen TVs are you going to buy before it gets a little bit boring, right? How much consumption are you going to do of hard goods before it's like, okay, I'm bored of this, right? So it's like, okay, I can put 25% of my risk capital in here because I don't want to buy any more hard goods. There is a deconsumption going on between buying more and more fast fashion junk, you know, there is a sea change in how people are consuming, and one of that consumption methods is, hey, I like to see things on my Blockfolio, I like to see cute pictures, and this is an acceptable form of consumption. Right?
Thank you. Okay, round of applause for our panel, guys. Hope that was good. Thank you, guys.